I have here like a prepared script of sorts. I wrote it quite some time ago, and I had it posted on the inside of one of my bedrooms at the time. I mean, not that I had more than one bedroom. I mean, say, I had a series of different bedrooms, and this was on the inside of one of them for quite some time. And I'm going to read it. Part of the reason is the source of the data, which I'll read first. I wrote it at the bottom of the second page. Purported to be the shipboard articles for joining with the infamous Captain Bartholomew Roberts, circa 1721. He died a year later, did this captain, by grape shot. And in the summer of 1720, he attacked Newfoundland in the summer of 1720. Which makes me laugh now that I look at it, but that's all on Wikipedia. That's, I think, the source for where I first ran this down. It's in other historical books. It's been books recorded in books of history, written in the last 50, 100 years, looking over, I would imagine. Although some of it was recorded in the 19th century as well, because they were interested in the very thing I'm now going to read. The Pirate Code of Conduct, or also the Articles of Incorporation, which made them a part of the crew of the boat, which Captain Roberts was captain of, and there was a series of officers each. I didn't record what the shares were, although I think it's probably here in the articles, right? Let's just read them through. Or let me read them through. Article number 1. Every man shall have an equal vote in affairs of the moment. He shall have an equal title to the fresh provisions of or strong liquors and at any time seized, and shall use them at pleasure, unless the scarcity makes it necessary for common good that a retrenchment may be voted. Article number 2, every man should be called fairly in turn by a list on board of prizes. I think I've already done this before. Because over and above the proper share, they are allowed to shift the clothes. But if they defraud the company to the value of even $1 in plate, jewels or money, they shall be marooned. If any man robs another, he shall have his nose near slit, put ashore where he should be sure to encounter hardship. Article number 3, none shall game for money either with dice or cards. That one I take very fucking seriously. I take that one really seriously. None shall game for money either with dice or cards. It's not one that I would play cards, but probably for money too. So, but while on board the ship, it's discouraged. That's one of those rules which has changed, I suppose. Article number 4, light and candles should be put out at 8 at night, and if any of the crew desire to drink after that hour, they shall sit upon the open deck without lights. Article 5, every man shall keep his piece, cutlass, and pistols at all times clean and ready for action. Article 6, no boy or woman to be allowed amongst the company of the crew. If any man should be found seducing any of the latter sex, carrying her to sea in disguise, he shall suffer death. Article 7, he that shall desert the ship or his quarters in time of battle shall be punished by death or marooning. Article 8, none shall strike another company on board of the ship, but every man's quarrel shall be ended ashore by sword or pistol in this manner. At word of command by the quartermaster, each man being previously placed back to back shall turn and fire immediately. If any man do not, quartermaster shall knock the firearm from his hand. Both miss their aim. They shall take their cutlasses. He that draweth first blood should be declared the victor. Cutlasses, hey? Article 9. No man shall talk of breaking up their way of living, i.e. of the company, until each has a share of 1,000 pieces of 8, i.e. silver dollars. 1,000 full silver dollars, pieces of 8, the whole thing. Every man who shall become a cripple or lose a limb in the service of the company shall have 800 pieces of 8 from the common stock, and for lesser hurts proportionally. Article number 10, the captain and the quartermaster each receive 2 shares of a prize. Master gunner and boatswain 1 1/2 shares, all other officers 1 1/4, private gentlemen of fortune 1 share each. Article number 11. The musician shall have rest on the Sabbath day only by night, on all other days by favor only. I am a sixth. I get wrote at the bottom. I am a sixth submariner. I'll be sinking shipping soon. For I set my courses surely by the phases of the moon. How doth thee spell I'm gonna screw that up. How doth they spell Sunday? I have another page. I'll put it in the second video. Pirates here, pirates there. Pirates, they be everywhere. Admirable piratical musings, courtesy of Gilbert and Sullivan. Pirate King. Although our dark career sometimes involves the crime of stealing, we rather think that we're not altogether void of feeling. Although we live by strife, we're always sorry to begin it. For what we ask is life, without a touch of poetry in it. All kneeling, hail poetry, thou heaven-born maid. Thou gildest even the pirate's trade. Hail, flowing fount of sentiment. All hail, divine emollient. Then all rise. Pirate King, you may go. For you're at liberty, our pirate rules protect you. And honorary members of our band, we do elect you. The pirate, for he is an orphan boy. Chorus, he is. Hurrah for the orphan boy. The general, and it sometimes is a useful thing to be an orphan boy. The general, bumper stickers. Chorus, it is. Hurrah for the orphan boy. Hurrah, hurrah for the orphan boy. Predictable pattern, addictable pattern.
And then the ceiling flew away.
And on the side of this page is written another little note. Best definition of guerrilla surrealism is an action so bizarre it is not classified under the law. A.D. That was signed A.D. I don't know what the fuck that is. Or the one together. Diogenes of Sinope. Takes a wise man to discover a wise man. I skipped something which I briefly touched on it twice in the longer reading. It's the value of money, which is clearly expressed in 1721-ish. The share is around... Where is it? The first part. Even if it be to the value of one plate of silver or whatever, right?
Quiet, Jim. Quiet.
If they defraud the company, they're going to have trouble. Even $1 in plate, jewels or money, right? Because it could be plates of gold or plate metal value or jewels or money. $1 is a single silver dollar as defined by the Spanish Empire. The pieces of 8 is the full coin, which is the value of $1 US essentially, or a sterling pound. Also sterling silver, right? So the piece of 8 is cut up into 8 pieces. There's the bits, and 2 bits being a quarter, right? And the reason why a lot of the coins in the North Atlantic region, anywhere that the various empires were intermingling. They tend to use coins of the same size to denote the run of the same value even to this day. I find it funny though. I'm really tempted to get on Wikipedia and read some of the things that at least used to be on the friggin'
Try it again.
the Bart Roberts listing. Newfoundland and the Caribbean, 1720 through June 1720 through April 1721. The Fortune, name of Bart Roberts' boat, headed northwards toward Newfoundland, raiding Canso, capturing a number of ships around Cape Breton and the Newfoundland banks. Most of them, they're not going to be armed too terribly well, or expecting a big fight, so he frightened the living hell out of a lot of people. Listen. Raided the harbour of Ferryland, capturing a dozen vessels on 21st of June. Attacked the larger harbour of Trepassey, sailing in with black flags flying. In the harbour he discovered 22 merchant ships and 150 fishing ships, all of which were abandoned by the panic-stricken captains and crews. This is Trepassey. Pirates were masters of Trepassey without any resistance being offered. Roberts had captured 22 ships but was angered by the cowardice of the captains. But in the morning he had a gun fired and the captains were forced to attend Roberts on board his ship. They were told anyone who was absent would have his ship burnt. One brig from Bristol was taken over by the pirates to replace the sloop Fortune, fitted out with 16 guns. When the pirates left in late June and the other vessels in the harbour were then set on fire anyway. So yeah, Bart Roberts treated the people of Trepassey apparently pretty roughly, but because of the behavior of the people, which they considered cowardice, and considering where they'd come from, they had an appreciation for how to respond to types of cowardice, and Newfoundland gave them pause, but they captured so much in terms of actual property. They couldn't believe that people didn't react with more I guess pride part of it. Pride had to be part of it. At least in terms of what the value of the property itself must have represented to them. So they're getting set back in terms of months or years even before they're ever going to have another go of it like they had before, because the boat's gone. If they had, imagine they'd set the harbour on fire. If he had actually burned them out. I've been reading too lately in other sources. One of them was a discourse on the mutiny on the Bounty that was written in the 19th century, and it also touched on what had happened to the natives on the islands, like of Tahiti, the Friendly Islands, and others, when they'd shown resistance to the explorers who'd come before Bligh showed up, because Bligh had been an officer under Cook earlier in his own career. And when they'd been at some of those islands, I don't know if it was Cook or, I can't remember which one it was now, if it was Cook or the captain that came before him, had to put down the natives who tried to, en masse, tried to take the ship, or at least tried to overpower the ship or raid the ship, using stones and numbers to their advantage. But then when the ship actually opened fire on them, they kept retiring back to further and further distance till they realized they couldn't really retire to any distance that was safe from the cannons of the ship. And to teach them a long-term lesson to not approach the ship with their canoes before the British left, they burned all the canoes. This was years after Bartholomew Roberts. This was years after Bartholomew Roberts. This was Captain Cook was in the late 1700s, right? Yeah, like the late 18th century, and Bart Roberts was the early 18th century. Anyhow, natives of Tahiti had all their boats burned, or I think it was Tahiti, because that's what the book's about. All their boats were burned, but the reason why the natives were so eager to come towards the boat and to overtake it by any means was because they'd already been trading on fairly friendly terms previous to that with the same captains, crews, and sailors. And part of the thing that the natives actually found the most valuable was plain old iron nails, which they had none of on the island. For example, to carve a canoe out of a tree using nothing but stone tools and no iron whatsoever, it's not that easy. So it takes quite a long time. That's why the brutality of burning the boats that must take so long to make using the tools that they got is harsh. At the same time, they burn them after they've already been given quite a large number of iron nails, and they've already also taken quite a large number of iron nails anywhere they could find them, anywhere that they could get access to them. So they were approaching the very ship itself in order to try to get access to more of them. And one of the things that the various captains had remarked upon earlier, like in the journals and the ship's logs, had been that the natives were not interested in what they tended to think of. If they were going to call them thieving, they didn't have the same values for things that we would have, or that the captains and the crews had. For example, the natives would clearly pick iron over gold or jewels. Iron was the only thing they were interested in, especially once they had the chance and a choice to trade for it. That's all they wanted. They were always disappointed when the crews and the ships left, because the access to iron, I would think, would be the first and most important thing in terms of what it can do to the raw materials around you. So I'm going to make a reading here from the book, which I mentioned in the video. Let me get the information on the book here first. Eventful History of the Mutiny and Piratical Seizure of HMS Bounty, its cause and consequences, by Sir John Barrow, which was, I got this from Project Gutenberg. Eventful History of the Mutiny and Piratical Seizure of HMS Bounty. So in the first chapter, he starts talking a little bit about records of the natives in Tahiti. Captain Cook is the source for this. Sir Blythe was one of his officers. With regard to their worship, Captain Cook does the Otahitians justice in saying, they reproach many who bear the name of Christians. You see no instance of a Otahitian drawing near the Toa with carelessness and inattention. That's one of their burial sites, one of their holy sites. He's all devotion. He approaches the place of worship and with reverential awe, uncovers when he treads on sacred ground, prays with a fervor that would do honor to a better profession, firmly credits the traditions of his ancestors. None dares dispute the existence of a deity. Thieving may also be reckoned as one of their vices. This, however, is common to all uncivilized nations, and it may be added, civilized too. This is John Barrow. But to judge them fairly in this respect, we should compare their situation to that of a more civilized people. Native Tahiti goes on board a ship and finds himself in the midst of iron bolts, nails, knives scattered about, and is tempted to carry off a few of them. If we could suppose a ship from El Dorado to arrive in the Thames, and that a custom house officers on board her found himself in the midst of bolts, hatchets, chisels, all of solid gold scattered about the deck, one would scarcely say what would be likely to happen. But if the former found the temptation irresistible to supply himself with what was essentially useful, the latter would be as little able to resist that which would contribute to the indulgence of his avarice, or the gratification of pleasures, or of both. Such was the state of this beautiful island and its interesting and fascinating natives at the time when Captain Wallis first discovered and Lieutenant Cook shortly thereafter visited. What they are now, as described by Captain Beechey, is lamentable to reflect. So I'm going to pause here for a second while I get the next quote. Here's an attestation to the value of the boats to a citizen or a person in Tahiti. The skill and labor which the Tahitians bestow on their large double boats is not less wonderful than their stone morays, from the felling of the tree and splitting it into the plank to the minutest carved ornaments that decorate the head and the stern. Whole operation is performed without the use of any metallic instrument. To fabricate one of their principal vessels with their tools is, says Cook, as great a work as to build a British man of war with ours. Fighting boats are sometimes more than 70 feet long, but not above 3 broad. They are fastened in pairs side by side, the distance of about 3 feet. The head and stern rise in a semicircular form, the latter to the height of 17 or 18 feet. To build these boats and the smaller kind of canoes, to build their houses, to finish the slight furniture they contain, to fell, cleave, carve, and polish timber for the various purposes, and in short, for every conversion of wood. The tools they make use of are the following: the adze of stone, a chisel or gouge of bone, generally that of a man's arm between the wrist and the elbow, a rasp of coral, and the skin of a stingray with coral sand as a file or polisher. Going to again pause here. This was again in the first chapter as well. Here's another instance of halfway through the first chapter of something I think is interesting. It was some consolation to find that his friends were fellow sufferers, Cook having lost his stockings. This is on a visit to Tahiti. That had been stolen from under his head, though he had never been asleep, and his associates their jackets. So the clothing was an object of fascination, and therefore they started to basically count coup on it. At daybreak, O'Bera brought to Mr. Banks some of her country clothes, so that when he came to us, says Cook, he made a most motley appearance, half Indian and half English. Such an adventure must have been highly amusing to him who was the object of it when the inconvenience had been removed, as everyone who will admit to the late venerable president of the Royal Society. He never doubted, however, that O'Bera was privy to the theft, and that there was a strong suspicion of her having some of the articles in her own custody. Being aware that this feeling existed, she absented herself for some time, and when she again appeared, she had a favorite of hers had taken them away. She said a favorite of hers had taken them away, whom she had beaten and dismissed. But she seemed conscious, says Cook, that she had no right to be believed. She discovered the strongest signs of fear, and yet surmounted it with an astonishing resolution, and was very pressing to be allowed to sleep with her attendants in Mr. Banks's tent. In this, however, she was not gratified. Sir Joseph might have thought that, if he complied with her request, his breeches might have been in danger of following the other articles of his dress. The Tahitians cannot resist pilfering. Must bear my testimony, says Cook, that the people of this country, of all ranks, men and women, are the arrantest thieves upon the face of the earth. But, he adds, we must not hastily conclude that theft is testimony of the same depravity in them that it is in us. In the instance in which our people were sufferers by their dishonesty, for their temptations were such as to surmount what would be considered as proof of uncommon integrity among those who have more knowledge, better principles, and stronger motives to resist the temptations of illicit advantage. An Indian among penny knives and beads, and even nails and broken glass, is in the same state of mind with the meanest servant in Europe among unlocked coffers of jewels or gold. This is Cook. Captain Wallace had illustrated the truth of this position by an experiment he made on some persons whose dress and behavior indicated that they were of a superior caste. To discover what present, he said, would most gratify them, I laid down before them a Johans, a guinea, a crown piece, a Spanish dollar, a few shillings, some new halfpence, and 2 large nails, making signs that they should take whichever they liked best. The nails were first seized with great eagerness, then a few of the halfpence, but the silver and gold lay neglected. Captain Wallace was the captain who preceded Cook. Here then might with truth be said was discovered the goldless age where gold disturbs no dreams, at Tahiti. But their thirst after iron was irresistible. Wallace's ship was stripped of all the nails in her by the seamen, to purchase the good graces of the women, who assembled in crowds on the shore. The men even drew out of different parts of the ship those nails that fastened the cleats to her side. This commerce established with the women rendered the men, as might readily be expected, less obedient to command, and made it necessary to punish some of them by flogging. The Tahitians regarded this punishment with horror. One of Cook's men having insulted a chief's wife, he was ordered to be flogged in their presence. Indians saw him stripped and tied to the rigging with fixed attention, waiting in silent suspense for the event. As soon as the first stroke was given, they interfered with great agitation, earnestly entreating that the rest of the punishment might be remitted. And when they found they were unable to prevail, they gave vent to their pity by tears. But their tears, as Cook observes, were like those of children, were always ready to express any passion that was strongly excited, and like those of children, they also appeared to be forgotten as soon as shed. And as instances this by the following incident, Mr. Banks, seeing a young woman in great affliction and tears streaming from her eyes, inquired earnestly to the cause, but instead of answering, she took from under her garment a shark's tooth, struck it 6 or 7 times in her head with great force. Profusion of blood followed. Disregarding her inquiries, she continued to talk loud in a melancholy tone, while those around were laughing and talking without taking the least notice of her distress. Bleeding having ceased, she looked up with a smile and collected the pieces of cloth which she used to staunch the blood and threw them into the sea. Then, plunging into the river and washing her whole body, she returned to the tents with the same gaiety and cheerfulness as if nothing had happened. Same thing occurred in the case of a chief who had given a great offense to Mr. Banks when he and all his followers were overwhelmed by grief and dejection. One of the women having struck a shark's tooth into her head several times till it was covered in blood, the scene was immediately changed. Laughing and good humor took place. Wallace witnessed the same kind of conduct. This, therefore, and the tears are probably a sort of expiation or doing penance for the fault. I'm going to pause again. Right at the beginning of the first chapter. First communication which Wallace had with these people was unfortunately of a hostile nature. Having approached with his ship close to the shore, I'm going to pause here for a second, not to hit the pause button, but just to say, as a Star Trek kind of fanatic, Prime Directive speaking here, if the first encounter happened to be hostile, I'm damn sure every other event that's recorded following that first hostile encounter is going to be flavored by that hostile encounter for quite some time. But anyway, first communication which Wallace had with these people was unfortunately of a hostile nature. Having approached with his ship close to the shore, the usual symbol of peace and friendship, a branch of the plantain tree was held up by a native of one of the numerous canoes that surrounded the ship. Great numbers, on being invited, crowded on board the stranger ship, but one of them, being butted on the haunches by a goat, turning hastily around, perceived it rearing on its hind legs, ready to repeat the blow, and was so terrified at the appearance of this strange animal, so different from any he had ever seen, that in the moment of terror he jumped overboard. All the rest followed his example with utmost precipitation. This little incident, however, produced no mischief, but as the boats were sounding in the bay, several canoes crowding round them, Wallace suspected the islanders had designed to attack them, and on this mere suspicion ordered the boats by signal to come on board, and at the same time, he says, to intimidate the Indians, I fired a 9-pounder over their heads. This, as might have been expected, startled the islanders, but did not prevent them from attempting to immediately cut off the cutter as she was standing toward the ship. The cutter being one of the ship's launches, like smaller boats that could be put off from it. Smaller stones were thrown onto this boat, on which the commanding officer fired a musket loaded with buckshot at the man who threw the first stone and wounded him in the shoulder. Finding no good anchorage at this place, the ship proceeded to another part of the island where, on one of the boats being assailed by the Indians in 2 or 3 large canoes with their clubs and paddles in their hands. Our people, says the commander, being much pressed, were obliged to fire, and by which one of the assailants were killed and another much wounded. This unlucky rencontre, the reconnoiter, right? Recounter, did not, on contrary, placed on the south coast, did not, however, prevent, as soon as the ship was moored, a great number of canoes from coming off the next morning with hogs, fowls, and fruit. Brisk traffic soon commenced, our people exchanging knives, nails, trinkets for more substantial articles of food which they were then in want. Among the canoes that came out last were some double ones of very large size, with 12 or 15 stout men in each, and it was observed they had little on board except a large quantity of ground pebble stones. Other canoes came off along with them, having only women on board, and while these females were assiduously practicing their allurements, the beatitudes could not be misunderstood, with a view, as would be seen, to distract the attention of the crew. The large double canoes closed round the ship, and as these advanced, some of the men began singing, some blowing conches, others playing their flutes. One of them, with a person sitting under a canopy, approached the ship so close as to allow this person to hand up a bunch of red and yellow feathers, making signs that it was for the captain. He then put off to a little distance, and on holding up the branch of a coconut tree, there was a universal shout from all the canoes, which at the same moment moved toward the ship, and a shower of stones was poured onto her from every side. The guard was now ordered to fire. 2 of the quarterdeck guns, loaded with small shot, were fired among them at the same time, which created great terror and confusion, caused them to retreat to a short distance. In a few minutes, however, they renewed their attack. The great guns were now ordered to be discharged among them, and also into a mass of canoes that were putting off from the shore. It is stated that at this time there could not be less than 300 canoes around the ship, having on board at least 2,000 men. Again they dispersed, but having soon collected into something like order, they hoisted white streamers and began pulled towards the ship's stern, where they again began to throw stones with great force and dexterity by the help of slings, each of the stones weighing about 2 pounds. Many of them were wounding the people on board. At length a shot hit the canoe that apparently had the chief on board and cut it asunder. This was no sooner observed by the rest than they all dispersed in such haste that in half an hour there was not a single canoe to be seen, and all the people who crowded on the shore fled over to the hills with the utmost precipitation. What was to happen on the following day was a matter of conjecture, but this point was soon decided. Here the author likes throwing in lines of verse from antiquity. The white man, actually this isn't from antiquity, I think this is Coleridge maybe, or Shelley. White man landed, need the rest be told? New world stretched its dusk hand to the old. Lieutenant Furneaux, in the next morning landed without opposition close to the fine river that fell into the bay, stuck up a staff on which was hoisted a pendant, turned to turf. By this process took possession of the island in the name of His Majesty, called it King George III's Island. Just as he was embarking, an old man to whom Lieutenant had given a few trifles brought some green boughs which he threw down at the foot of the staff, then retiring brought about a dozen of his countrymen, approached the staff in supplicating posture, then retired and brought 2 live hogs which they laid down at the foot of the staff, and then began to dance. After this ceremony the hogs were put into a canoe, and the old man carried them on board, handing up several green plantain leaves and uttering the sentence on delivery of each. Some presents were offered in return, but he would accept of none. Concluding the peace was now established and no further attacks would be made, the boats were sent on shore the following day to get water. While the casks were filling, several natives were perceived coming from behind the hills and through the woods. At the same time, a multitude of canoes were from behind a projecting point of the bay. As these were discovered to be laden with stones, were making toward the ship. It was concluded the intention was to try their fortune in a second grand attack. As to shorten the contest would certainly lessen the mischief, I determined, says Captain Wallace, to make the action decisive and put an to the hostilities at once. Accordingly, a tremendous fire was opened at once on all the groups of canoes. I'm laughing because I remember Bartholomew Roberts and what he did to the harbour of Trepassey. Accordingly, a tremendous fire was opened at once in all groups of canoes, which had the effect of immediately dispersing them. The fire was then directed into the wood to drive out the islanders, who had assembled in large numbers, on which they all fled into the hills where the women and children had seated themselves.
Here they collected to the amount of several thousands, imagining themselves at a distance to be perfectly safe. The captain, however, ordered 4 shot to be fired over them, but 2 of the balls having fallen close to a tree where a number of them were sitting, they were so struck with terror and consternation that in less than 2 minutes, not a creature was to be seen. Coast being cleared, the boats were manned and armed. All the carpenters with their axes were sent to the shore, with directions to destroy every canoe they could find. And we are told that this service was effectively performed, and that more than 50 canoes, many of which 60 feet long and 3 broad, were lashed together were cut to pieces. This act of severity must be cruelly felt by these poor people, who, without an iron of any kind of tools, such as stones, shells, teeth, or bones supplied them with, must have spent months and probably years in the construction of one of these extraordinary double boats. Such was the inauspicious commencement of our acquaintance with the natives of Tahiti. Their determined hostility and perseverance in an unequal combat could only have arisen from one of 2 motives. Either from an opinion that the ship of such magnitude as they'd never before beheld could only have come from the coast to take their country from them, or an irresistible temptation to endeavor at all hazards to possess themselves of so valuable a prize. Be that as it may, the dread inspired by the effects of the cannon, and perhaps a conviction of the truth of which had been explained to them, that the strangers wanted only provisions and water, had the effect of allaying all jealousy. For from that day of the last action, the most friendly and uninterrupted intercourse was established, and continued to the day of the Dolphin's departure. Provisions of all kinds, hogs, dogs, fruit, and vegetables were supplied with the greatest abundance, in exchange for pieces of iron, nails, and trinkets. So you can say what you like about Bart Roberts. I think the Admiralty has also got an interesting way of dealing with things. So, be that as it may.